We want to start at home with the ongoing conversation about people's shocking property tax bills. They recently came in the mail. Yesterday, we talked with the chair of the Board of Review about the appeals process, reopening, giving people a chance to now protest their rate hikes, and some instances that went up 133% or more through December 12th. You have that time frame to go in and start your appeals process. I asked specifically about tax breaks to big downtown properties and the conversation surrounding a shifting tax burden to neighborhoods that really cannot afford it. He said, and I quote, "The overassessments are all over the place. There's no justification, and that it's an issue for the assessor to look at the models and figure out what's going on. No rhyme or reason, and you can't just blame it on the Board of Review." Cook County Assessor Fritz Kaegi is here with me now. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Yeah, hey, great to be here. Good to see you. Good to be here with your viewers.
So South and West Side leaders were joining with you today to call for property tax relief and to condemn the Board of Review's tax breaks for downtown commercial properties. Listening to what I just said, what is your reaction to that?
Well, it's no longer a debate. It is a fact that big cuts for commercial properties at the Board of Review have driven the increases that we're seeing, especially in Black and Latino neighborhoods. In 2/3 of the neighborhoods, where their bills would have been flat or down, but for the shift that happened on cuts in big commercial properties downtown by the Board of Review. And I've spoken to hundreds of homeowners on the west and south sides just in the last few days, and they're shocked and upset by these increases that they're seeing, and I'm as shocked and upset as they are. And what the data shows, and you don't have to take my word for it, this comes from our treasurer, Maria Pappas, this is part of a pattern. In the last couple of years, as we've talked about on the show before, there was about $2 billion of tax burden that was passed on to homeowners by big cuts on commercial properties at the Board Review. This year, it's about $500 million. It's a fact. It's not a debate. And that works out to about $700 per homeowner tacked on to the increase of their bill because of cuts for commercial properties. Now, the Board of Review can make all the excuses that they want for that, but it is a fact. And it's very troubling because some very famous big properties that are doing very well had lower bills this year. For example, some of the biggest hotels downtown, famous hotels that start with an H, their last time they were reassessed was in 2021 when they were empty. Now they've recovered. Their revenues per available room are above where they were before COVID, and yet their bills fall by millions of dollars. The data centers that host things like this interview that we're doing now, that are doing all this stuff on AI that people talk about, the biggest data center downtown, owned by a $50 billion company, has lower bills. And so that falls onto our neighbors. A lot of neighborhoods like Englewood that saw big tax increases, that was entirely explained by the burden shift that happened. If you look at Austin, same thing. In 2/3 of our Black and Latino neighborhoods where bills are up, they would have had flat or lower bills. And people are outraged. People are really feeling shocked. And that's what our press conference was about this morning.
Chair Cardenas said that there's a lot of misinformation about that shifting burden and that businesses have 25% of their assessed value. Homeowners, it's 10% of the assessed value, but that everyone is treated the same way. You would argue that's not the truth?
Well, again, he's providing an excuse for the fact of these cuts. And it's no excuse. You know, the way our property tax works under the law, under state law, under Cook County, is commercial is assessed at 25% of market value and residential is 10. But when Commissioner Cardenas says that, he's kind of revealing something about himself. He's saying that he's going to take the law into his own hands by giving these big commercial properties a mulligan for some reason that's beyond the law, and then he wants to pass on that burden to homeowners because he thinks that's a good excuse. I'm a fighter for the average homeowner, and the law says that we're supposed to be assessing all properties, commercial and residential, in line with what they're selling for. It's very simple. And when he, as the part of this pattern of the commissioners of the Board Review, is valuing properties too low, and a landmark county study showed that in several years after the pandemic, the Board Review set commercial properties 25% too low. That is what's causing that shift that Treasurer Pappas has pointed to in her reports and then has continued this year. It's not a debate, it's a fact. $500 billion of property tax burden passed on to homeowners, $700 billion for a homeowner. I don't accept those excuses because it doesn't reflect the prices that are actually being paid for properties out there, and it's shifting the burden on the homeowners and causing so much trouble. So that excuse is unacceptable.
Yeah, he told me that they follow standard guidelines, though, about rules and evidence, that everyone gets a fair shake, and that they're a quasi-judicial body. These are his words. They're a quasi-judicial body that oversees your office's work.
Well, let me tell you about another office that oversees their work, the Inspector General of Cook County. And they have said that a big critical vulnerability to the board review is that they take campaign contributions from the property tax appeals lawyers who practice before them. They can take money from those lawyers in the morning and then the evening hear a plea on them. And what the Inspector General of Cook County said is that is a critical vulnerability that diminishes the repute of that agency before the public. And this is why I, since I've been assessor, have in place a strict ethics code that forbids me from taking any campaign contributions from property tax appeals lawyers. And that's what the public wants to see. They have seen the property tax lawyers get pay to play, have these preferences where the burden is shifted onto them. They've seen big name politicians act as predators on homeowners, passing the burden onto them while they get rich, and people are sick of it. And this is what I'm calling out here, and I'm afraid we have another instance like this. So you can hear all the bureaucratic mumbo jumbo about quasi this and evidence that. Basically, they're taking evidence from people who are donating to their campaign. They're taking bogus appraisals, lowball appraisals that call a full meal a side salad and accepting that as valid. Well, what the county has looked at in studies after study is they're finding that the board review, by whatever rules it's taking, by whatever evidence it's taking, is coming up with values that are 25% too low in most of the years after the pandemic that they studied. And that has shifted billions of dollars onto the backs of our homeowners, which is why so many people's bills are up. And that's why we're so upset and shocked, just like homeowners are. And that's why it's got to stop.
If those ethics concerns are true, I could see where that would be a problem for sure. So you and those who gathered with you today are calling for relief for homeowners, urging taxpayers to ensure that they're receiving all exemptions that may be available to them. Let's go over the exemptions that are currently available and what you're hoping may get added to the list in years to come to help people out.
Absolutely. So let's work through the checklist for everyone watching out there, and then tell your friends too. First thing, first line of defense is let's look for exemptions on your property tax bill. These are savings that every homeowner is entitled to if it's their main residence. Look on the bottom left-hand side of the tax bill that the treasurer sent you. If there's zeros across all the exemptions, you're probably not getting your homeowner's exemption. If you're over 65, you're entitled to the senior exemption too. And if your income is under 65,000 as a household, if you're a senior, you're also entitled to the freeze to lock assessment in place while home values are rising around you. We've been doing many events the last few days talking to homeowners, and we're seeing hundreds of people, dozens of people at every event that we go to who are missing these exemptions. 1 out of every 3 homeowners doesn't have this exemption. So, for example, if you live in Austin and if you don't have a homeowner's exemption, that would almost wipe out the typical increase that you experienced this year. So let's get you signed up. You might not have noticed the need for the exemption in the past. You can just come to our office, go to our website. We can issue you a corrected tax bill that you'll pay over at the treasury. This is one of the few times in life where you can go back in time and be treated as if you had those exemptions. You can go back up to 4 years, but we want to make sure that you get signed up for those now before this year is done. That could be thousands of dollars coming back to every homeowner. That's the first line of defense. And we just did some events in West Garfield Park in the last couple of days, and many of the people who are coming to us don't have their exemption. So that's the first thing let's go to.
Mm-hmm. And I know you're proposing a circuit breaker legislation that would cap unsustainable tax increases. Talk a little bit more about that.
States, plus the District of Columbia. they recognize as a cornerstone of their property tax system that no matter how well you design a property tax system, there are going to be people who are vulnerable to spikes, to changes in bills. And we need to have relief for them so that people aren't displaced from their home, placed under stress, and potentially lose their home. So what we're proposing is a property tax relief program called a circuit breaker that would take from the best features of those 29 other states and give you relief if your bill spiked 25% or more. If your income is below a certain level to qualify, we would propose $100,000, and you would get relief for up to half of the increase in your bill that you experienced for 3 years. It's not a permanent relief, but it gives you time to adjust your finances. Right now, what we hear from so many people is that suddenly you have to pay $1,000 or more than you had to last year, and you have to do it in 30 days. And it causes so much stress for families, and it puts people in real danger of losing their homes. So that's why we need to have this as part of our system here. It would require some state funding. It would require about $200 million a year. That's less than half of our state's budget, and is worthwhile to do that like 29 other states do, to recognize that it's so important that we have hundreds of thousands of families that are put in this situation every year, so that we should be providing relief for them so that they have time to make decisions and adjust their finances and not be put in danger of losing their home.
Do you know what kind of support or even backlash that this proposal is getting right now?
Well, we're supported by the Southland Regional Mayors and Managers Association. They represent the mayors of communities in the south suburbs that have really dealt with some of the toughest situations where bills have spiked as housing values have risen in their communities and as the Board of Review has slashed commercial property values in their communities. They've really felt the brunt of it. So they're the first to recognize that. The Southland Regional Mayoral Black Caucus supports the circuit breaker. I wrote an op-ed in the Tribune more than half a year ago with leading mayors in the south and west suburbs who represent the communities with the highest tax rates, calling for this. We've done town halls with leaders and mayors down there for it. And more community members are coming around to see the need for this. You might remember a few years ago, tax bills spiked in Pilsen, and we've worked with members in the Pilsen community to develop this program. We work directly with leaders in Pilsen in the community to have this program put into place, and more people are coming to recognize the need for this. We hear from our leaders in Springfield that let's try to design a program that can be statewide, that can be put in place statewide. So we are working on designing that, and we will introduce it in the spring session.
Okay, we'll look for that update for sure. I'll put a pin in it. We'll circle back. But your office found that nearly 250,000 households across Cook County have seen these unsustainable tax bill increases in recent years. I do want to ask you, kind of on a final note, what you say to people who feel like there's a blame game, a finger pointing thing that's going on while their bills continue to rise.
Well, what we do is we try to tell the truth, to show them what's going on, and then we also show that we're ready to practically help and be the fighter for them in this process so that someone's fighting for them. So first of all, we show how if in some cases, we basically what we do is our assessments are matching what houses are selling for in your community and other properties too. And it's a conservative estimate. We don't just take a couple sales. We need to see hundreds of sales over a period of a few years to set our assessments. Third parties show that our assessments are in line with market. If anything, they're a very conservative estimate of market values, but we also make sure that we're walking humbly and that we train our analysts to be in our outreach team to be aware of situations where we might have been off, or we didn't have a key critical detail. Maybe the foundation of the home is broken, or there's some other detail where we didn't get it right. And that's where we need to be attentive to homeowners who are in that situation so that we're listening. But we also want to shine a light on these practices where the board review is shifting so much. We've seen in the last 3 years, bills spike in double digits in the south suburbs, in the north suburbs, and now in the city this year because of huge amounts of tax burden being shifted onto people that data is showing are not earned, are not merited, that they're getting reductions that they don't deserve. At the commercial level, at the board review, that's being shifted onto them. And it's important that people know that so that the system can get better. And someone needs to fight for the average homeowner and not just stand idly by and twiddle your thumbs. We're instead rolling up our sleeves, playing the role that we need to make in advocating for the average taxpayer. That's why I fight for the circuit breaker. That's why I shine a light and make sure that the county is measuring and studying these changes on appeal. That's why I applaud Treasurer Pappas when she puts out reports like she did, showing that $2 billion of tax levy burden had been shifted onto homeowners the last few years because of appeals, largely at the Board of Review. Someone needs to fight for taxpayers when this is happening. And so you might call that finger pointing, but it is a fact that we had $500 million shifted onto homeowners this year. No amount of excuses can justify that or really be merited or just in the eyes of homeowners who are feeling these bills rising.
Assessor Kaegi, thank you so much for coming on Chicago Live. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Anita. Thanks to all the viewers. And please look us up at cookcountyassessoril.gov. Thanks.
All right. You take care.